That's pretty cool. Well, welcome to the podcast. Hi, everybody. I have a new episode for you. We reached episode 10 of season 2. So, what is that? I think that makes 20 episodes. I think that's pretty incredible. I still have a lot of content to release for the rest of the year, and I'm really thinking I should go ahead and release that this year. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to release them bi-weekly, so I think that I'm going to release them every week. That might be a lot, but let's just play it by ear. Anyway, now that I got that out of the way, I would like to introduce my next guest. I am incredibly fortunate to be connected with the people that I have connected with, people that inspire me and make me laugh and have accepted me in their communities. I am very grateful to be connected with Dante. Dante is the host of Off the Mats podcast. So you think you like horror podcast? He's the owner of BJJ Wiki. He is a BJJ practitioner. He's a blue belt. He has a lot of knowledge and likes to use his mind, just like me. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce episode 10 of season 2, Dante of BJJ Wiki. I hope that you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. All right. It says recording on my end. Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Anura Mathis of Freedom to Fight, the host of Freedom to Fight. I am out in the wilderness. No, I'm out in Colorado. I wanted to make sure people could see the beautiful mountains that get to be nearby and all the fresh water sources nearby. So, but speaking of water, it's just starting to rain just a little bit, which is fine. But we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I'll jump into question.
All right. My name is Dante. I am a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, and I've been training Jiu-Jitsu for about 7 years now under Crazy 88 banner here in Maryland. So that's pretty much it for me. Just Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm the host of the Off the Mats podcast as well. So
yeah, I'm so grateful to be connected with you. It really on your memes and on your page and all of that. But yeah, tell me, you're the host of Off the Mats podcast, but you've got other projects too, right?
yes. So the main project was Off the Mats podcast, which we just crossed the 3-year anniversary for that. So pretty excited about that because I didn't think we were going to make it past 3 episodes, let alone 3 years. So that's a big deal. But along the way, an old friend of mine, we're always in contact, but he was a guest on the podcast a couple times, and one day I sent him a message like, dude, do you want to do a podcast? Like, I don't know, let's just kick some ideas around. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And we didn't really have an idea. We just sat there. I like to have meetings before doing things. I like to seem professional and official, but I'm not. So we would just sit around and drink a couple beers, and then while doing that, it turned into, let's review beers. Let's do a review show for beers. And we've kicked so many names around for that. I think we're about to change the name again, but right now it's called the Colompton Beer Club. And that's one that I kind of warn people, is like, you may not, if you may not want to jump into that one. Just like, you want to ease yourself in, because just, we don't edit anything. We just say goofy things. And it's not in the sense of trying to offend anyone. It's more so we're trying to make each other a lot of times uncomfortable. And sometimes we try to make each other laugh. And then it's like, that might have been too far. And then the third project that I work on is called So You Like Horror. And it's a podcast about horror movies where, again, I was just sitting with another old friend, and I said, someone was like, do you want to do a podcast with me? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, let's do a horror movie podcast. It's like, okay, that's a good idea. Then I started, I sat down with my wife and then another friend. I was like, why don't we do this as kind of a group thing with a rotating cast of hosts and rotating guests similar to Off the Mats. And we are still, I think we've kind of got our groove now, but in the beginning, that was also something where we had a hard time trying to define what horror is to people. And, I think we found our groove. Right now, we're working on horror by the decades, and we just finished the 1990s. I'm currently working on notes for the 2000s. And, we'll take, a recent movie, we'll do a review, and we'll just kind of sit and give our thoughts on it. And then sometimes we like to just take subgenres in horror, such as, psychological thrillers or slashers or religious horror or scary kids. And, we'll kind of talk about the different films in those subgenres. But all in all, I use all these podcasts really as a form of therapy, along with training on the mats as well, to kind of keep me busy and not sitting in a funk a lot. So it's like, find something to do. So I'm always, whether it be doing a podcast, doing notes for a podcast, training jiu-jitsu, playing video games with my daughter. I have a basement full of action figures, so I'm always posing things. I'm always trying to keep myself mentally busy so I don't get into a rut or anything.
Sure. You stay busy. I believe in that philosophy, and I'm glad that you brought up therapy already. The podcasts are your form of therapy. I'm sorry for all the other people that are around making noise, but it'll definitely not show up on the recording. So,
Oh, I don't hear anyone.
right, okay, good. Motorcycles and airplanes and just people living lives. Yeah. But I really
Gotcha.
enjoy being out in nature. Like that's grounding for me. That's therapy for me. So, let me ask you, why is it therapy for you to do these podcasts?
I think a big part of it is, so when we do the beer review podcasts, again, my buddy and I, we just kind of talk. It's just general conversation. And there are times where I feel like it's really us venting about sports, is us venting about current events in the world, venting about, so we'll review a beer, but that's really only 2 minutes of the show. We do 3 beers and they're about a 2 to 5 minute review. So the other hour and a half is just us really kind of talking and getting stuff off our chest for the week. We'll talk about like, hey, so how's your week been? Did you watch any movies or shows that might, spark up conversation? So I think when it comes to that show, it definitely gives me kind of an area to vent a little bit. And then when it comes to Off the Mats, a lot of times it is kind of an interview format. So it gives me an opportunity to learn. So if I'm, pulling in information and learning, just about other people's journey on the mats, it does give me kind of a comfort to know, like, we all are doing this differently. We're all doing it for different reasons. So when I get nervous about training and like, oh man, my progress is so slow, and I talk to someone in here, like either they're going as slow as I am, or they've like, hit brown belt in like 3 years. It's like, but there's still this thing that gives me kind of this comfort to understand that we are all kind of training on a different path. Everyone's journey is different. And then for the horror podcast, because I watch a lot of horror movies, you got to dump that somewhere. you can't just you can't just watch a horror movie because I watch them before I go to bed. So you can't just like watch a horror movie, go to sleep, and then wake up and feel like everything's gonna be okay. I'm normal. Like no. So we sit down and we talk about horror movies and get all our thoughts out about that. Um, so for me, it is really a matter of therapy and talking, and just I think talking helps. It does a lot.
Yeah, yeah. That's why talk therapy is effective, is having a place to vent, a safe place to vent. But talk therapy works that same way. It's a place to talk, to vent. You said the word horror like 3 times, and every time I think of horror, I think of spiders. Like my living situation right now consists of a spider problem. Not the only issue, but exactly. So like it that's intolerable. That's not something that is within the normal realm of like a living situation. We don't just live indoors and then just live with different kinds of insects that could kill us. Oh my
No.
goodness. But anyway, I don't like horror. I'm not a huge fan of horror. My sister is, one of my sisters is, and she does the same thing. She watches horror films before bed and then like has nightmares and stuff like that. But I like psychological thrillers, like those things that you brought that up. I really
Yeah.
enjoy thinking and oh, that was the killer, that's the bad guy or whatever, the twist.
Well, that's the funny thing about horror movies that I always try to. That was the first thing we sat down to discuss when we did the show with all of the hosts together. Is we all had to define what is horror, because when we talk about a movie like Signs of the Lambs or Seven or Untraceable or The Good Son, people are like, those aren't horror movies. The Good Son is very much a horror movie. You just took in another person's child and that child is trying to kill, or no, I'm sorry, you took in another child and your child who's already in your home has already killed one of your children, and now he's trying to kill the other kid, and everybody's just like, oh no, it's fine, he's just having a tough time. That's terrifying. I've always said, like, look, if I ever became wealthy and I have all this money, I want to help. I went through the foster care system. I was adopted. So those are things that go through my mind. It's like, oh, I would love to, give back and do that. Then I watched The Good Son. I'm like, maybe, maybe I can help another way. Maybe they don't have to live with me. So, but you have films like that where people will say that's not a scary movie. They'll say Seven's not a scary movie. That's terrifying when you got a killer basing their murders off the seven deadly sins and they're doing it in a long form type of way. Signs of the Lambs is terrifying in so many different ways. And people are like, well, the common saying is, well, those aren't scary movies. Those are too good to be horror movies. And that's what's frustrating. So,
No, I but
but psychological thrillers count.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think people that don't consider those movies horror films are like the people that just like watch like crime TV, and like they're just really normalized to that. They're like, that's just a that's just a show. That's just no. But like movies are made from real life. Like they're a depiction of real life. Okay, and we're back now. um I'm totally fine with sharing with my listeners and viewers what's going on. I'm gonna make sure that it's public, that people know that I'm being harassed by white people. So, um, I'm very sorry that it's disrupted things, but maybe that's for the better, so that people know, like, hey, it's not something that happens in the past. Like it's present day stuff. Um, anyway, I
Yeah.
I want to I want to speak on something that you said earlier. You mentioned that you were in foster care, um, and that you were adopted. And
Yes.
I just my heart goes out to you. I know that you're a full person. You have a career and a family and all of that. Like not that you're suffering, but I started my mental health career in foster care, and
Hmm.
I have a lot of love for foster children and changing systems that really fail them, which are most systems. So I just want to
Yeah,
speak on that because it's you brought it up, and this you're somebody that's been affected by this. So anything you want to say about that is totally welcome.
absolutely. I mean, the big thing for us being in a foster care system, fortunately, we were only with one family. You know, we didn't move around a lot, my brothers and I. Uh, we ended up with a wonderful family in Flint, Michigan. We're still in contact with that family to this day. It's unfortunately, our foster mother did pass away back in 2019, and it she was kind of that glue that held us together. But our sisters, they're still in contact with my brothers and I, and um, our nieces. We're all just kind of we're not as close knit as things could be, seeing as they're in Flint, Michigan. I'm in Millersville, Maryland. So, but we still communicate. We still text. We still, um, use social media to stay up to date with things if we're not, if we haven't talked in a while. But the family was great to my brothers and I, and then my grandparents adopted me from them, and I moved to Newark, Delaware, which was a huge, huge change for me, just culturally, emotionally. Uh, it was a wacky thing for a minute, and my grandparents were great along the way with kind of just raising me as they've raised a bunch of kids prior. My grandfather's a psychiatrist. I'm sorry, psychologist. Not, I made that mistake earlier. For some reason, I don't know why. I was saying psychiatrist. I was like, why am I calling him a psychiatrist? No, he's a psychologist. And then my grandmother was a social worker. So there was a lot of patience and understanding in the home. But as I was saying to a friend earlier, I feel like maybe there was too much patience and understanding with me, because I think with my foster family, there was a level of discipline where if they say, hey, we need you to do your chores now, take the trash out now, that meant right now. Whereas my grandparents are like, hey, take the trash out. It doesn't have to be right now, but as long as it's done before you go to bed. And the problem with that is, as a 12-year-old kid, I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it later. And I never got around to doing it. So, there were those things, but they're great with taking me in. My brothers ended up going with one of my our uncles, and he did a great job with raising them as well. They're up in Detroit, Michigan right now, so that's where all my family resides mostly. Like my grandparents are down here, and a few of my cousins. But all in all, the system in itself, it has its flaws, and you love to see it get better. Uh, it is just, I'm no expert on it, but I always just wonder, because there's so many kids out there that really could just use patience and understanding from other people, and I feel like there's sometimes people that just don't really. I don't think it's that they don't get it. I think that it's tough being patient, especially when you're dealing with someone else's children, and you think you may have the answers, and everyone's different. So when you're working with someone else's children and you're trying to help foster them and help give them a better life, sometimes it's not necessarily accepted, and people can become impatient and kind of give up on those children, and it's very unfortunate. But you know I'd like to see just kind of a better screening, I guess, of the foster parents that are also taking the kids in, and however it may be, matching them up as well.
I, oh goodness, I agree with you, and I appreciate you sharing with me your life, um, the things that you survived, and Goodness, growing up in Flint, Michigan, I'm
Uh,
just I'm taken aback by that. And um yeah, go ahead.
Flint's a really interesting place because as a kid, Flint just seemed like regular everyday life. Nothing ever seemed odd to me until after I left. When you're a kid, it all just seems like this is business as usual. But once I became an adult and I look back on things, it was like, oh my God, like that's not normal. Like normal kids don't deal with this, or the societal norm. When you say normal, but there was a guy who would walk around the neighborhood with a shopping cart, and he had candy, like full size candy bars, M&M, things like that, and we called him the Candy Man. And the Candy Man was also kidnapping kids too. But that didn't seem, it was just again business as usual. Like, oh, well, we didn't know he was kidnapping kids until later, but it was just like it should have been one of those warning signs, like, hey, this is kind of weird. But as a kid, you just see a guy selling full size candy bars for real cheap. Like, I got 50 cents. I'm going to go ahead and buy. And then also kind of thinking about it in a bigger sense of like, oh, he's just trying to earn. Meanwhile, yeah, he's earning by kidnapping kids and doing God knows what. So that was kind of a, you know, thing that we saw but didn't really connect. We see people just get beat up on street corners, and again, it just seemed normal. Like, oh, that dude got stabbed. Hmm.
Yeah.
Just, I got to get to school. You just keep moving. But, when I look back on it now as an adult, it's like, I think of it in one way of like, I've seen some things and I've survived some things, in the sense, being in Flint, growing up in Detroit, just seeing, I feel like I saw far worse in Detroit than I did in Flint. Because like I said, the family that took me in Flint, they were a really good family, so they did kind of keep us grounded and kind of on the straight and narrow. So we never hung out with like the ruffians and got into any trouble. I got in trouble a lot because I was of that age of just a kid, a preteen that's just not a troublemaker, but curious. It's like, oh, like what does this do? What happens if I jump off this garage? Oh, that hurts. Oh, drats, I'm in trouble now. Or like, I've got these matches and I've got these leaves. What is this? Oh no, this is a big problem. I should run. Um, but my family, they were always great about things, and I never look at it like when I would get disciplined or in trouble, I didn't think of it as unfair. They didn't beat us or anything, but we definitely spent a lot of time standing in a corner and thinking about our decisions. And I, that was enough for me to know I don't want to, like, I'm gonna stop getting in trouble. I don't want to stand in this corner anymore. That's dumb.
I I feel you. I of course you're of that age. Let me back up just a little bit. I want to say I'm very sorry for your loss of your foster mother. Um, what an important person in your life, and just to openly share, I have shared on my first episode and other episodes that I lost my mother in 2021. So pandemic kind of time frame just kind of rocked everybody, but
Sure.
it's challenging to lose loved ones. So my heart goes out to you and to your family. And growing up in Flint, I'll say this as well. I've been to Flint. I went to Flint in 2018. I started a water project to help with the
Okay.
water crisis there, and I haven't ended that. I just haven't had the resources to kind of keep that going, but I would like to. So I I just my experience in being there, it was like the people there were forgotten about. Like clean water is an essential need for every human being, but it just seemed like a ghost town. I mean, people live there, but
Yeah.
it felt like we don't care if you live or die. We're not going to come over here. Like, I spent some time in Detroit. I got followed by some man in Detroit. Just I flew into Detroit and just so surprised. Yeah, I just I it's hard to survive those situations, but it's easier when you're unaware, when you're a child and you're unaware. So um and I want to
Yeah,
mention that you said your grandfather is a psychologist and your grandmother was a social worker. Is that right? Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know if you know, I know it's on my profile, but I'm a mental health professional. I'm a trauma therapist. So I know
Yeah.
that psychologists in certain parts of the country can prescribe medication, but um that mainly that's up to psychiatrists generally, and social workers are so important. I've done a lot of social work working with homeless communities and all different populations, but just though those are important people, my goodness. So thank God you have those family
Yes.
members and you became a successful person. You're a fighter, you're a father, you're all of those things. You're a husband, you're thriving. So, and you've inspired me as well. I'm very grateful to be connected with you. So, thank you.
Now, thank you. Um, it's funny because when I think about growing up and I think about where I am now, and it's just funny looking back. Like if you would ask that 10-year-old kid in Flint, Michigan, what would he be doing? Just based on the trouble that I was getting in, you probably think eventually you're going to end up falling victim to whatever is going on here in Flint. I think me getting out of Flint for myself really, really was a big deal. Now, that's not to say, the folks there can't overcome. I mean, Clarissa Shields, who's considered, probably the greatest female boxer of all time at this point, she's from Flint. Mark Ingram, former NFL running back, he's from there. I think Michael Moore, documentarian, he's from Flint, Michigan. It's like people can get out of there. It's just, but it is tough. It's tough. You have to really have that drive. I got lucky. My family, again, pulled me out of there. And it's weird because it's like I got lucky to get pulled out of Detroit and I got put in Flint. And, it's like, is this really, am I any luckier? And then, looking at the circumstances, definitely. And then, even being in Flint, like I said, the family that I was with, they, there are no nonsense family, that was a big thing too. They were a family. They loved each other. When I was in Detroit, we were around family members that always fought, physically fist fights, like over nonsense. And, I moved to Flint with the big family just the same. And you didn't see that. There might be arguments, but there's never any physical altercations that took place there. And there are open discussions. And I think that kind of shaped things for me as I continue to grow in understanding that, hey, things can be resolved, with words. And then also being with my grandparents as well. My grandmother is a very patient woman. And I mean, to raise the kids that she raised and then to raise me, you have to be patient. You can't. My grandmother had all boys and one girl, and that one girl was my mom. And my mom, she's a tough individual. And then there's me, and just raising this group, it's a lot of craziness. All all just kind of madness, all crazy. So I don't know if the recording was still picking
I,
that up. And I was like, okay, I think we're good.
I
I got
think
that out
it's
and then I
like,
paused. I
oh,
muted
there's
everything.
two, there's two Black people that are trying to thrive. Let's cut them off. time talking about mental health and overcoming adversity, because like, let's cut them off.
The internet, it's the world of the internet. I think that, but that is a crazy thing though too, because it's like on my Instagram, I post my memes and I post my technique videos, and then I try to post stuff about mental health awareness, and it gets really weird when like people give pushback about me. I don't know how many people know that I'm black, like on my Instagram, other than the ones that, you know, that I've recorded with. And even when I record, like how the screen is right now, how I'm right in the center, it didn't start that way. I had a different camera setup, and I would only have half of my face, if anything at all. Sometimes the camera would be down. Sometimes I would be out of camera, out of shot. Now I'm forced to be in front of the camera because the camera's right in the center. But I don't know that, when people first sit down and record with me, I don't know if they realize, oh, this is a black dude. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm human. Like, it's cool. I'm not sure what you were expecting, but, I'm here. And I think, when it comes to, mental health in the black community, it's a mixed bag at times. I'm seeing more support, but I still get pushback from other individuals of our own race that it's not like they're saying, no to mental health, but I do get kind of that, let me play devil's advocate. And it's like, oh, I mean, you can if you want, but I'm not here for that. I'm just trying to make, people aware that suicide prevention and talking about that is a thing. I lost my best friend to suicide. I've had my own battles in the past. In the past weeks, I've had my own battles where I wake up and I'm like, why am I doing this? And me switching jobs, I thought it was the job that I was at that was just kind of really dragging me down. And I started a new job, and I really, really love the job. The job is very rewarding, but I still have those bouts with depression. And, you get so many people that, say, oh, well, you just got to push through, or just do it, or just get up and go. And it's like, it's not that simple. And the more we talk about this, I feel the better, because there needs to be an understanding that there are 8 billion people on this planet, and it is not a one size fit all scenario for us. Some people can just get up and go. Like I said, you had the individuals in Flint who have become, professional athletes or some sort of, celebrity in some form, and they found their way out. But you have other individuals who are in that situation where they wake up feeling defeated, and they wake up feeling like, am I ever going to get out? Because it is difficult. And it's not just Flint, Michigan. It's not just Detroit, Michigan, Wilmington, Delaware, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and I'm mentioning predominantly black towns here on purpose. You do have individuals that, they feel like they can't get out. And sometimes it helps to talk, because talking kind of helps you form a pathway and understand, well, what's going on? Why do I feel like I can't get out? And then once you start getting to the root of that, maybe you start to get out. Maybe you start to, and also understand it's not just going to be an overnight thing. Like I understand this on the mats, where I'm like, I have to keep training and working, knee cut. I need to work this drill. I need to work this, and then it's not going to be perfect. I try to go for the knee cut, and someone's going to still get their knee shield in there and block me, and I'm like, defeated again. Well, I'm going to go back to it and try again. And that's the same thing with life in general, trying to like dig out and kind of cutting it back to the mental health aspect. Again, it's not going to necessarily be that way for someone that's full on depressed, but at least, at the very, very least, like I said, talking does kind of build those pathways. And like, I talk a lot with all the podcasts. I talk to my therapist once per month now. I talk to friends, but there's still moments where I wake up in the morning, I power through, I go do my job, and I come home and I'm very happy that I get home earlier to be with my family. And I play video games and board games with my daughter. We play chess, we play checkers, we play snowboarding video games. But there's still this demon tugging at me, and we need to talk about these
totally
things.
agree. That's in part why I created Freedom to Fight, because I know that martial arts helps to heal trauma and help improve your mental health, but it's not the only resource. And if we're not talking about it, I said something on my last released episode with Trevor of BJJ Wiki, that it's when you're denying something is happening or denying your feelings, it actually is controlling you. So if you can find a way to release it by talking about it, or sometimes by, withholding, sometimes that's a good choice. Sometimes it's not talk therapy. I'm a trauma therapist, and I specialize in EMDR therapy, which is not talk therapy. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So it helps to reprocess traumatic memories, but you're not doing a ton of talking. You're really just doing a lot of visualizing, and you're allowing each side of your brain to communicate with each other. So my phone keeps popping up. There's messages that pop up on my phone. That's why I keep clicking it. Sorry about that. But I just wanted to mention that I believe in having an outlet of some kind to allow yourself to go through the natural processes of human life. Like, it's natural for us to have highs and lows, and to have vocabulary to talk about it, like to know what that is, to know how to deal with it, to just know how to not get trapped by it. So I completely support that. I support everybody, but especially Black people that are, maybe confused about their own mental health. Like, I think that Black people that are not kind of on board with therapy and getting help themselves, I think it's just a part of systemic racism. I think it's part of our oppression to believe that we are not human beings. We're not. Yep. We don't need the things that other people need, that white people need, that we need to behave in a different way. Like, it's part of our oppression to completely neglect ourselves. That's part of it. For us to not find a way to thrive, to get out of that. It's a mental prison. So to not know about our mental health, we're just reinforcing our own prisons. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I get that. I oftentimes wonder, when it comes to the ideal of, like, people saying just push through, whether it be Black or white, Asian, Hispanic. I think it's an older generation thing too. I think older folks specifically really kind of, look back at it as just like, push through, power through, you'll be all right. And, it's funny because I've said to people, much like I think of jiu-jitsu and therapy kind of in a similar vein, I think everyone should try it. When I say with therapy, I would say 3 sessions. The first one to kind of open up, get to know each other. The second one to kind of build a rapport. And then the third one to determine if you want to continue or if you need to continue. And, I know that's what worked for me. And like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, category out here in the world. But to me, that makes the most sense. And, I think of that in the same way with martial arts as well. It's like, martial arts is tough. So's therapy. So's opening up and talking to people and letting them know what's going on, and not just letting people know what's going on. Sometimes it's tough for you on your own end to say, I'm willing to talk to someone about this. And then you start opening up, these different drawers, and you start remembering things. You're like, oh my God, like I tapped into a memory that I long forgot. And it could be scary at times. There are things that like I've tapped into recently where I'm like, I've gone into denial about. I was like, I don't think that's not what really happened, is it? You start really thinking. It's like, oh, maybe it was. Oh my God, like here we are again. I got to figure this out. But I think when it comes to the lack of understanding and talking about what's going on and going to seek therapy, I do think that can call back to just older generations and playing that game of like, well, this is how we've always done it. Like, we've never, looked for treatment before. We never looked for someone to talk to before. And especially in the Black community, it becomes this weird thing of, you'll see, I've had cousins like, oh, you go to therapy, that's what white folks do. It's like, I think just folks do it. People do it. Like everyone needs therapy. I think everyone, all 8 billion of us.
Things are going to change. The pandemic changed a lot of things, and people realized, hey, maybe I don't have it all together like I thought. And there's no reason to be perfect. He really does not want us to finish this interview whatsoever.
So it's funny because it's like, it's almost like after I get done talking, like when you go to talk, it'll come in distorted, and then it's like drop. So it's like, oh, okay.
I don't know why.
Like maybe I'm taking up too much of the.
I guess so, but I have not had this serious of a connectivity issue before, but I'll just keep going. Shift to asking you, what are your plans for BJJ Wiki and your podcasts, and what are your future plans?
So with BJJ Wiki, I used to have a website attached to it, and it kind of served the same purpose that the Instagram serves right now. A little bit more so with articles though, talking about the jiu-jitsu community, and I kind of want to get back to that, but also there's a lot behind the scenes with it, more than I was really anticipating. So right now, when it comes to BJJ Wiki, the ideal is to kind of continue on with at least this social media presence and kind of build the podcast. When I deal with both these entities, I don't, there's no monetary gain from either. It's really just, me kind of using this as a hobby, a distraction, whatever it may be. But as it relates to the podcast, the biggest thing that I really want to do with the podcast is I want to give people a voice. I've had teammates say, oh, you can get this fighter, you can get this, big name grappler on. And that's not necessarily why I started the podcast. I wanted to start the podcast more so for individuals who are just regular everyday folk to come on here and talk about their jiu-jitsu journey and just talk about jiu-jitsu in its community as a whole, versus saying, hey, let's go seek out, Craig Jones. That'd be cool, but I don't think I'm the best interviewer. So I wouldn't even know what to say to Craig Jones other than like, hey man, so talk to me in that cool accent of yours, like, because Off the Mats is really kind of a conversational podcast where, we try to make it organic, and, there might be a question here and there that I might have, but at the end of the day, I just want the regular everyday grappler to be able to tell their story. And I've had guests on that people have reached out to me and said, dude, that story was very, very inspiring from this individual or another individual. I had one gentleman, he asked me if I had any more episodes upcoming with people going through a weight loss journey, because he was on his own journey. And I was like, well, I don't, but I would love to have you come on and be a guest and tell me your story. And he came on, and I felt like a great episode. It was a great response. Lots of people seem to really respond to it. And that's kind of the thing that I want to do with Off the Mat specifically, is to give people a voice to share their story that may not normally get heard.
I think that's really beautiful. And I have the same approach. Like I've been lucky to have black belts on my show, but everybody's important. I'm including, so the episode I'm releasing today will be of my high school psychology teacher and how she really helped frame my career in my life. And I had my my graduate psychology mentor on my show. I'm having my first musician next week. I'm gonna, and include comedians, and I want everybody to have a place to talk about mental health, because it affects everybody. And so I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate you coming on my show. And it seems like we have a lot in common, and a lot more to talk about. I think that my technical issues are causing some hiccups, but I'll ask you a final question, and I'll allow you to ask me any questions that you have, and then we'll end there. Okay.
Sure.
So my show is called Freedom to Fight, and my final question is, what does freedom mean to you? What does that look like?
You said, what is
What
freedom?
does freedom look like to you? What does it mean to you? What does it look like? Yeah.
So what it means to me is to be unapologetically yourself, to be able to move and flow in life without having someone try to define who you are, without someone trying to tell you how your story should go. That to me is what freedom looks like to me. It looks like, individuals thriving and growing and getting better without feeling like they have, these mental and psychological restraints that are always, pulling at you. So, when it comes to getting on the mats, or when it comes to doing the podcast or anything for myself, there's a lot of freedom in that, because I think about years ago, before I started training, I would have never thought, if you said to me, what we're in 2023, if you said to me in 2013, Dante, well, you're going to be a grappler and a podcast host. With what was going on in my life at that moment, I felt kind of locked down. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I was stopping myself. I kept telling myself I wouldn't do that, because it just didn't feel like it fit, things. So I feel like once you kind of open up and say, you know what, take a chance, and not feel restricted by anyone outside or internally as well, that's where you start to become free, in that sense of just being you. There are going to be forces on the outside externally that are going to try to stop your progress, and it sucks. And it's easy for me to say, well, you just got to ignore that. Sometimes that's not always the answer. But as long as you keep pushing forward and doing what you got to do. Like this episode, we've had all the technical difficulties, but the thing is, we kept pushing forward. We're like, we're not going to let this stop us, keep moving. So that's what it means to me.
Speaking of, It said, absolutely not. You will not be successful. Well, we have had significant technical issues. We've had significant other issues, other people trying to, disrupt this. I appreciate your answer to what freedom means to you or what freedom looks like to you, because it should be that way. It should be you living your full life without interference, and I'm gonna keep fighting. I am giving myself freedom to fight, and I will always do that. I will always allow for people to come on my platform to use their voice, and I would love to come on one of your podcasts and have other discussions if you'd like to have me.
Absolutely. But I would definitely love to have you on Off the Mats as a guest. And even though I know horror movies aren't your thing, but you did say you like psychological thrillers, and I think there's a bit to dig into there. So like we can figure something out.
Yeah, I would love to do both or one or the other. I'm totally down with that. And I'm leaving the floor for you to ask me anything you want. Don't feel any pressure to do it, but I want you to feel comfortable to do that as well.
Fair. And I appreciate that. I'm honestly horrible with asking questions, but two questions did come up for me. Um, the first question is something that I kind of ran into earlier in my social media life with jiu-jitsu, and I would always put up a post saying jiu-jitsu is my therapy. And I got a lot of pushback from a lot of people on that comment or on that post. And I just wanted to ask you, as a trauma therapist, when you see a post like that, like how do you what do you think of, when people say, hey, this is my therapy? Are you more of a, kind of like, you know what works for you, or kind of like, well, no, you need to do, like, this can't be your therapy, like you got to have this instead? So where do you stand on that?
So great question. Um, I so a couple of answers. I don't think that me as a professional, like, I don't have a God complex. Meaning, like, I think we all have God in us, and that can be expressed in a number of ways, but I'm not right about everything. I don't need to be right about everything. Therapy may not help some people because there is a significant history of people being wronged by mental health systems. And yeah, therapy in general can help, but specifically, there are free clinics and residential facilities and rehab centers, and the list goes on, full of people that have compassion fatigue and are harming their patients or their clients because they're not doing the work for themselves. So I can't say that therapy is for everybody because therapy needs some therapy. And I do think that I do think that martial arts, of course, is a healing resource. I can see that argument that jujitsu is my therapy. It does irk me a little bit because I've been in situations where I was training and my instructors or the people that I was training with weren't calling out things that were inappropriate. And if you don't know, in my Muay Thai training, I got a concussion last year, and it hospitalized me. I was on a breathing machine. So to say that, martial arts is always a safe air, it's not. It's not always healing if you have jealous people that are trying to injure you. Like, it's not always therapy unless it's a safe place. So yes, it can be. And yes, it's everybody's right to identify things for themselves, but that's not my experience, and I'm going to pick better environments to keep me safe. So those are my answers.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And that's one, thing that a lot of us tend to lose sight of, myself included sometimes. It's like, it's not always the safest environment. It may be safe for me. I may feel comfortable there, but I know during the 2020 and 2021, between those two summers, there's a lot of individuals coming out and speaking up about abuse, female specifically, speaking of abuse in the jiu-jitsu community. And the interesting thing is, there are individuals that were pushing back at that. And I just found it very, very weird. It's like, if people are saying this happened, sure, there definitely has to be, an investigation into it, obviously. But, as I like to always say, at least for me, when people are coming onto the mat, new individuals coming onto the mat, we had a new young lady start last week. And I had the opportunity to work with her, and my goal is to, this being her first experience, to make her feel as safe and as comfortable as possible, because this is your first experience. I don't want you coming in thinking, oh, Dante's a jerk, and think that's all the jiu-jitsu. Now, at the same time, I can come in and be very patient and understanding. She kicked me in the face a couple times trying to, go for an arm bar. And I was like, it's fine. It's fine. You're learning. We're all here to learn, and I'm here to help you learn through this experience and make you feel comfortable. But there's also kind of a false sense of optimism there too, because there's this ideal of like, hey, I'm super patient, I'm super understanding. Not everybody's going to be that way. And I wish that everyone were that way, because it would make it a safer environment for people to kind of get over their traumas. When my foster mother passed away, I found out the evening before, and I went into train the next day. And there was a lot that I was getting off my chest on the mat, losing myself in the reps. Then when it came time to spar, I wasn't aggressive with my teammates or anything, but it was helping me to focus and just kind of get lost in thought, and just kind of deal with it in a different way for myself. So, for me, it serves as therapy, but again, it's not for everyone. But I think it's not as easy as a yes it is or no it isn't type answer.
Yeah. And perhaps it should be martial arts and therapy, maybe, and finding the right therapist and being in the right, circumstance really, really matters. My experience with my concussion was, I was not supported by my dojos, my gyms. I was ostracized. I was pushed out. Literally, me complaining about what was going on, or what happened and what was going on, got me kicked out. So it wasn't like they were holding themselves accountable. They were fighting with me while I was in and out of the hospital, blaming the injury on me and saying, hey, you're no longer a part of this jiu-jitsu association. Like, that's not what should happen. And I appreciate you taking the time to make sure that people feel comfortable. So women feel comfortable.
All right. So as we close out here, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Mathis, again, for having me on as a guest. I greatly appreciate just having an opportunity to tell my story and, really discuss my feelings on, a multitude of things here as it relates to martial arts, as it relates to mental health, as it relates to just being people. Again, it was a wonderful opportunity, and I greatly appreciate it. For anyone that's interested, if you are looking for any of my links or anything, you can always find me at bjj.wiki on Instagram, or Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. Both Instagram accounts, I do link the podcast for myself here with Off the Mats, and so you like horror as well, those can be found in the link tree in my bios. And yeah, again, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me there. Otherwise, I look forward to speaking with Dr. Mathis again on my own podcast, and then we'll go from there. So thank you everyone once again, and goodbye.
And that's it. We covered a lot of topics on this episode. I think that I will post some more information about anybody needing mental health resources, foster care systems, anything related to mental health. I'll post that on my social media, on my Instagram, on my TikTok, on my Facebook, and YouTube. I will post resources. I will post any explanations about what we covered, and some information about EMDR as well. If you're interested, you can always reach out to me. My Instagram is freedom_2_fight. My email address is freedomtwofight@gmail.com. So freedom to fight, just TWO. You can connect with me on Facebook or TikTok. And if you'd like to reach out to Dante, you can follow his pages as well. BJJ Wiki on Instagram, Off the Mats podcast on Instagram, and So You Think You Like Horror Instagram. I'll put all of his information below. I have invited Dante to be a part of season 3, which will be some live demonstrations and some other cool things. And I also got an invite to be on his show. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode and got something from it. And you're getting something from every episode I release. But I will have new content soon. Thank you for all of the love and support, and I'll see you soon.